Welcome to this very special breakout session about SOSV's hard tech program, HAX, and the ways that it turns scientists into great founders. So without any further ado from my standpoint, I'm going to hand it over to Susan Schofer, who is the Chief Science Officer at HAX, and is going to run this great breakout session for us. Thanks, Susan.
Awesome. Thanks, Ned, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I think we're going to have a really fun conversation today. So we'll start out with some quick intros. I will go first, and then maybe the rest of our HAX team will quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll have our impressive and exciting scientists turned founders give their intros. So I'm Susan Schofer. I'm a partner here at SOSV. I'm also Chief Science Officer at HAX. My own background is I have a PhD in chemistry. And after finishing grad school and doing a brief postdoc, went into industry where I quickly learned that, science and technology are key to the innovation that we need to change the world, but the best science and technology do not automatically win in the market. So it takes a lot more than awesome tech to make an impact and to get something into people's hands for broader adoption. So I'm excited to have this conversation. I think we'll have a lot of good things to discuss, and I'll hand it over to G to do a quick intro.
Thanks, Susan. Hello, good morning. So my name is G, and I've been with the firm for 8 years. I'm a partner and a CTO of the firm. At HAX, I lead the engineering team, and we're very hands-on investors, as you will find out from this session. And you will see me half the time in the machine shop and half the time in the meeting rooms. And out to you, Andy.
Thanks, G. I'm Andy, a partner here at HAX. I run investment operations for us here for companies looking to get into the program, but I'm a chemical engineer by training with a background in the oil and gas and energy sector.
Awesome. So Will, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Will. I'm the Chief Science Officer and co-founder at Cocoon, which is a company that takes waste from steel manufacturing and turns it into a sustainable cement alternative. I did my PhD on sort of large-scale carbon mitigation and carbon removal technologies, developing various tracers for trying to understand those processes and build models to try and predict them. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Brandy, do you want to give an intro?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Brandy. I'm the CTO and co-founder for Ayrton Energy. My background is also in chemistry. So I did my PhD in fuel cell electrophotolysis and then switched over to chemical engineering for my postdoc work. And I've been working kind of between chemical engineering, physics, and chemistry for the last decade in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta. Ayrton is doing liquid organic hydrogen carrier technology. So we're developing novel ways of storing and transporting hydrogen so that it is as easy to move around as diesel is today.
Awesome. Mohsen?
Hey everyone. My name is Mohsen. I got my PhD from University of Waterloo on electronics and optics and nano a little bit. My background actually is mostly, as I said, on electronics, semiconductor devices, and those stuff. After PhD, I worked in the field of optical communication and quantum computing for a while. So between all those kind of different technical tasks, until we founded Hyperlume. And in Hyperlume, what we're doing is practically we're trying to replace those copper wires inside of data centers and connecting those chips and boards using optics. So that being said, you're saving lots of energies inside of data centers, wasted as a heat. And also we're trying to increase the efficiency of computing by lowering the latency and making the bandwidth much higher. And that's great to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you all. So I think we'll start off with a simple question. I'd be curious to learn for all of you guys on the panel, what made you want to be a founder?
Yeah, good question. I think by the time I was finished with, I thought I was finished with academia, I felt like I'd sort of developed a toolkit or a set of skills that I felt would perhaps be best served in industry, where my instinct was I could have impact a lot quicker, and work more on critical path objectives to actually scale technology, develop technologies that can scale and actually bring them to market and see them alive.
I can talk a little bit about how I ended up here too. So when I was doing my postdoc, I was working for a supervisor in chemical engineering that was really focused on building more of the entrepreneurial community in Calgary. And I was a bit hesitant about what that would look like, but I ended up getting into some of the courses, learning a little bit more about it, and really getting to see some of the impact that going into industry can have compared to staying in academia. I think the way you said that in your intro, Susan, was really well put. And yeah, so I figured, why not? Let's try it. And this is actually my second company. The first company that I had founded, I had very little to no understanding of product market fit. And I think that's our next kind of question section here. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But yeah, I think it was really around having that toolkit, like you were saying, William, too, and being curious and wanting to try.
So for me, it's kind of, I think everyone has different story. Practically for me was a little bit different. So from the time that I was PhD actually, and I wanted to choose a project to start my PhD, I always were looking for some industrial project. So the people's are different. Yeah, it doesn't mean like science projects are not good actually. So I had the opportunity to choose between the projects that has some very amazing science backgrounds and solving even amazing hard problems in the science, and projects that can lead to some industrial applications. I was always looking for some of those industrial projects. So it was my kind of, I can say the first day, my ambition. And then when I started my PhD, luckily, I think also it's sometimes you're luckily positioning in a good university, and University of Waterloo is so famous for these entrepreneurship kind of activities. We have Google and all those companies in Waterloo, and Waterloo is very kind of patent friendly university. And then you see lots of companies and people around you, and you get really attracted what they're doing and how they're making these businesses. And then, as you say, there is some skills that you need to learn. And sometimes, like similar, as I say, Waterloo was an amazing university. The similar as HAX is a great place, actually. You're getting some great-minded people, like they wanted to do the same thing as you. And you, with your conversation, interaction with them, you try to develop the skills that you need. And then after working in industry for me, I think I was again lucky to have some mentors, because sometimes you have some hypotheses on building a business, but those needs to be verified. So I think I was in a discovery mode after PhD, working in industry to see how everything works, how they get traction with customers, how they solve the problems, because being a founder is a little bit different from being a researcher. In the researcher, you're coming with the best answers to the questions. So the questions are there. A supervisor or someone is hiring you to provide the best answers. But when you're a founder, you're looking for the questions. It's a different mode, I can say. Yeah, so you're looking around, see what's the most important question or the problem that I can solve. It's not how I'm going to solve it, because you're going to make a team. I think for me, it was always from the day first when I started my PhD, when before that, I was so ambitious to have my own business, gathering kind of like-minded people with me, and practically to see the people that I love to work with them, just and make a team. And then finding something that is really scalable. I remember during the PhD, I was always looking on those market reports that they said in next 5 years is going to something happening. And none of them happened actually in 5 years. It takes 15 years, but like, I think there is something sometimes inside the people.
Yeah, that's all super great, Mohsen, actually. And I think that's a good transition into some of the next questions, which are just like, obviously there's a big difference between the mindset and what you're trying to do when you're in academia versus once you go into industry and start a company. And I love how you frame that. Like, we're not just looking for the answers, we're actually now looking for the questions. And I think the right questions to ask is a really good way of framing how you should think about that as a founder. because there's tons of questions out there, but answering the right ones are really the ones that are going to get you to success. But yeah, I would love to hear more of all of your thoughts on what is the shift in mindset? What's been fun about the transition? What's been challenging? Where have you had successes and where have you had more challenges?
I guess one thing to sort of point out is that there's a lot more weight riding on your experiments and their outcomes. It's like, you need good data and you need really solid data, and sometimes people are pushing you to develop that at pace, and you really have to maintain your scientific integrity to a large extent, and say, like, this is the way that you have to do this if you want to do these experiments and get these results and show them to investors. Like, we need to be really rigorous about this. But one thing that you can do, which is quite different for academia, is like really think about the process and think about, well, what's actually the quickest and the most rigorous way that I can get to an answer right now, and how can we speed up the rate at which we can do experiments and iterate. And yeah, I think that's a really fun challenge, thinking about, well, we have this design of experiments, but how is all of it necessary? Can we miniaturize any of it? All that stuff I find really quite fun.
My top word in my speaking notes for this section is pace. So I definitely reflect on that. It is a different pace, and one of the things that we say in our company is, you go from academia where your goal is to have 100% of the question answered. Every aspect of it. And in startup life, the value of a startup is our ability to move quickly and solve a unique problem. And so you now have to start making decisions on a lot less information. We joke that it's about 40 to 50% of what you think you need is where you're starting to make those decisions on. And so knowing how to do experimentation so that every experiment is absolutely as valuable as possible is a big shift. I also think that having gone from academia to entrepreneurship, one of the things that takes a little bit of work is taking that risk adversity sort of mindset and putting it in a bit of a closet. I think that one thing that's really nice with academics is, yeah, it's not easy, and you are taking some risks with the work that you're doing, but it's a different level when you go into scientific entrepreneurship, and you have to have that faith in yourself and your team that you're going to move past these roadblocks. And so, yeah, being able to really trust that you will get there, and having that willingness to kind of jump off a cliff and see where it goes of sorts is important.
Yeah. I mean, touching on sort of Mohsen, what you had said before, go ahead if you were going to answer the question.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say what you had said before, which is like finding the right questions to answer. Like, I think that's one of the major mindset shifts that I've seen is like, technology is what you have in the lab and what you develop. Product is sort of a different thing, and they're very linked, but they're also quite different. So how do you think about turning technology into product, and how do you get to that point of view that, again, is very different from what you might think about as a researcher?
That's an amazing question, actually. There is lots of ways to answer that question, and I can say there is no specific right answer for the question. Everyone may have different experiences that might be correct. But when you're at the school and doing the research, what's happening is practically your success really depends on you. So I remember myself, I was going to the lab every day from 9 a.m., coming back home 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Sometimes we have to stay at lab because the device was working and we have to do all those tests. And my supervisor was saying, when the horse is riding, get your ride. And don't let it go. And so get all the results to publish a paper and those stuff. Yeah. And then if some days you're sick or some days you're not feeling good, it means that day you're not producing anything. Yeah. But it's somehow in university that everything depends on you. When you're coming outside and you're finding a problems that is important, I think it's not all about you, and it's about making a team. Just you have to make a team. One other thing is the difference is when you're kind of as a PhD or sometimes master, is I think the brain of the human is really kind of, I think for everyone is acting pretty much the same. When you're in kind of a long run relationship with something, you don't see so much kind of the, I can say, downside of things. If you love someone, if you like someone, and you go and make some partnership as a friend or spouse or wife, anything, and then since you love something and you're engaged every day with that someone, you practically don't see kind of, I can say, the mistakes or some downside of that person. It's the same when you're at university. So you're working 3 years, 4 years on an amazing project. And then because you're early day engaged with that problem, you think the world is exactly that problem. Everything is around that one. If you're working on DNA, electronics, power electronics, maybe energy, and you normally don't question yourself. Is that really something that they have to be focused on? What's the kind of relationship with these problems and the big picture? But when you're coming out as a founder, as a startup, practically, you have to make sure you're constantly questioning yourself. And you have to constantly check if this is something I'm making, it's really marketable. It is really something, the most important thing that I have to be focused on. Or the answer that I have is really the right answer. What's exactly the statics behind of that? I think when you're coming out, it's important actually how you're questioning yourself every day, constantly, not stopping, not dreaming, not getting kind of full in your brain relationship with the problems. And I've seen companies, sometimes I can say on technology ego, they really fall in their technology ego, and they say the solution that the day first they have is the best solution, and they really miss the market and they cannot really scale it. I think when you're coming outside as a company and you wanted to solve a problem, first of all, you have to make sure you're gathering a great team. It's not all about you. And then constantly questioning yourself about, am I doing the right things? Am I kind of focused on the right priority? And then moving forward with that kind of mindset is practically, I think, two different things when you're coming to the industry and you're trying to solve some problems.
So don't
I mean,
fall.
was that the right answer?
Was that time will tell, I think, but I think don't fall in love with your technology is a great point, and really, especially like probably a challenge in a way for academics trying to make this jump, because
Mm.
always like jump to the next practical thing. Like we might actually have to pivot, right? Anyway,
Mm.
Will, go ahead.
Oh, so yeah, just to add on to the end of that, like a great way of, sort of gut checking your tech is just talking to customers like really early and having quite bruising conversations sometimes with, the actual end user of that. And yeah, I think that bursts the bubble pretty quickly sometimes with regards to, what you're developing and whether it's feasible. And yeah, a lot of the times those kind of conversations can be difficult initially, but really very, very, very valuable further down the line. If there are some, specific no goes that you present to them that they say, this is just not going to work for us. And yeah, I think just to add to Mohsen's point, like very good to have an incredible team around you that are constantly feel, capable and confident enough to challenge you, but then also going out and talking to customers is invaluable.
Brandy, anything to add here?
I was going to say, I think Mohsen, you talked about this pretty well in the fact that it's such a team effort compared to that like individual contributor mindset that we have from academia. And actually that transition was pretty hard, at least for me. Like there was a lot of feedback that I took from mentors. I read a lot of different leadership books and things like that to really understand how to go from being an individual contributor where I'm in the lab and running things to managing a team and knowing how to effectively manage them, to have the we call it positive conflict, and have that everybody is really pushing their own thoughts into this. And when we make a decision, it's because we have thought about all of the different aspects, and this is the right decision for us. And yeah, the shifting from an individual contributor to more of a manager was easily one of the hardest things in the early days of the company.
Yeah, and it's also just terrifying. Like actually
Yes.
hiring people and then having to manage them. Like it's yeah, it's not a straightforward concept.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome runs pretty deep on that front too, where you're like, you're smarter than me. Why are you even listening to me at all? And so yeah, being able to really use your smart people effectively and yeah, manage, do projects like proposals and all of that stuff. It's a lot of imposter syndrome the first year as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm going through that, I suppose, right now. And I guess because we've just started building a team. So our first hires were sort of like 4 months ago. And yeah, I find that now the team's sort of bedded in and I'm kind of getting it. It's actually very satisfying. Whereas, there have been some real low points along the way. But when it works and, people are generating data and, it's really interesting, then that it's like, it feels worth it, but it's dark to begin with. Like, it's not easy.
I love that description. No, 100%. It is so satisfying when I like to say that I have the most fantastic team of nerds that I get to work with. And yeah, everybody has such different backgrounds. Our team is really cross-functional, from mechanical and electrical engineering to really like fundamental chemistry sort of backgrounds. And yeah, it's super fun when it all works. But building it and then being able to define a culture where things are productive but still fun is a challenge.
Yeah, you guys are touching on some interesting points too about like, I definitely hear a lot of founders or other people say, try to hire people that are smarter than me, right? Like you really want to hire a team that is better together. And how have you guys thought about that from the perspective of just sort of filling in, making a well-rounded team, filling in potentially gaps, and also accepting the fact that maybe you are going to end up hiring and managing people that are smarter than you in certain ways, but that whole comes together to be greater than all those parts.
Well, I can talk about that if Brandy looks so. Actually, I'm trying to complement what Will and Brandy said. When you're practically, we're trying to kind of compare right now, and I can say the academic world or the career that we had as a researcher to as a founder now. Yeah. So all of us have been somehow working on some projects and some expertise. I can call them, those are the superpower that we have. Just deep understanding on one field is something that you're trying to practically every day empower yourself with those amazing technical skills that are going to stick with you until end of your career. That's amazing for every founder. But practically, when you're going to be a founder as a startup, those technical skills, as we'll say, they are not going to differentiate you from rest of your team. Because everyone, as Brandy says, coming with amazing skills that most of the times in their kind of specific kind of skills, they are much better than you. What really differentiates you here as a founder is your communication skills. When you're at university, the most communication that you have with the world is publishing papers. Like once in a year, you'll go to conferences, and in the presentation that we have in conferences, we have too much information on introduction to show to the world that we are so smart. We know the problem, and then a few slides and the result and on discussion of those stuff. That's normally how it works early days. But when you are a founder, when you are in a company, I can say the most important skills that really differentiate you from the rest of the team or from the rest of co-founders is your communication skills. You have to be so clear on your presentation, on your emails, on your documents, so you cannot make ambiguity. So if someone from your team is reading your emails, the key takeaways should be really clear. So they should not guess. With minimum effort, they have to know what's their task that they need to do. And sometimes on the other side, you're at university, you're so nice. So you try on the master's students, undergrad, and your supervisor, you try to be nice. Specifically, if you're in Canada, you're so much nice. So you're not hurting anyone. But when you're in the business, you have to be so blunt. You cannot just kind of sugarcoat things, because after a while, after 6 months, 7 months, you realize you have been so nice without giving direct feedback on the problems, on the kind of, I can say, the solutions, and you're missing lots of time. So I can say communication is really the key as a founder. So that's something that you have to work on it. You have to build upon that, and that's practically what differentiates you as a founder, as a kind of CTO, CEO, CSO from the rest of the team, that they're really deep focused on solving technical problem.
I think,
But
yeah, I think to add to that as well, with regards to communication, like being able to communicate and define really rigidly, like the scope of someone's role and what specifically they own and what processes they specifically own it makes everything so much easier. It makes my job easier, and theirs intrinsically a lot easier. What I find quite difficult, like sort of in a conversation, or when these meetings are happening, is giving like quite mundane tasks to really talented people that just need to get done to progress the business. Like, can you just mill this material to this fineness for 2 days? Like, I find that quite hard to do, but you need to, and that's something that we were always very aware of when we were hiring. It's like, we need people who can just do that kind of stuff, but also are capable of being incredibly technical when it's required, which is 80% of their job, but 20% of it is relatively mundane, perhaps.
Yeah, you guys are touching on so many good points, and I think both of those are super important. Communication is so important, right? And that was for me, like, as I was in my PhD, realizing that I really cared a lot about not only the science part, but also the context and why does this matter. I think that's a really good perspective that then is really applicable to taking technology and turning it into a real business. And I like what you're saying too, Will, about having to give people mundane tasks. I think we all struggle with that. And then we realize, well, the flip side is otherwise I'll be doing it, which,
Yeah.
also. But yeah, I guess I wanted to talk a bit about all of your experiences working within HAX. We are lucky in that we get to be on so many of these journeys with all of you different founders and kind of jump in and play a role almost as teammates to you, right? Helping you take the tech, take pieces of that maybe are less core to where the IP is, and being able to develop that alongside you. I don't know if you have examples you could share about that experience. And I also invite G to speak about how we think about it kind of as we go through this conversation.
I can start. So I would have to say the first thing that HAX and SOSV did for us was really believing in us at an early stage. Maybe this kind of ties back into that imposter syndrome side, but it was so reassuring to know that somebody else could see our vision, even if I wasn't the most effective communicator on it. And then when it comes to like being able to support early stage companies, HAX was so helpful. We were not financially gifted in that we could just go and hire 100 different engineers and engineering firms to go and do separate projects for us. And so we really leaned in on the HAX's engineering team for like a bizarrely wide range of different things, from doing industrial design so that we could really try to effectively communicate our vision to customers and get feedback on it, to procurement. Canada is not known for being able to manufacture things really well or on a reasonable cost. And so being able to lean in on HAX's team to help us with procuring parts for 10% of the cost that we were able to find them here, and vet those vendors so that we knew that what we were getting was good quality. And then random things. We had them do simulations for us. We had them do CAD for us. We had, lots of questions just asking about how do we go about this problem. And that support at that stage was extremely important because we would never have been able to afford that otherwise.
Yeah, I would completely echo what Brandy's saying there. You know, we felt like we had, you know, another 10 sort of employees when we were at HAX because of the capabilities of the engineering teams, the input from Susan on the science itself and how we should be thinking about the experiments and the laboratory setups that are there. I should also add that we were a particularly sort of difficult company with a weird set of requirements. So we required, I can't remember what the energy requirement was for that furnace, but it might have been like 20 kilowatts or something. And within, you know, a week, HAX didn't have it in the building because it was pre-renovation, but we'd found a spot, you know, 15 minutes away, which was an old foundry, which had the power that we needed so that we could just start doing experiments. And it was it was like seamless. It was great.
If I wanted to add something to what Brandy and William said, I can say amazing people of HAX. Actually, it's important. As a founder, practically, so we talked about kind of communication skills. We talked about solving the problems, but practically these are not a book, as Brandy said, that you can go read and you learn everything. You know, you normally learn by the mistakes, by doing some of those crazy mistakes. And you after doing some of the mistakes, you say, oh man, I just really made a bad mistake that may kill the whole business, you know, and then you learn from this. So a feedback loop is important. As someone who I really had some kind of, and I really appreciate the people I work with them as a mentors, when you're working in HAX, there is lots of benefit to that. First of all, you're really kind of your hardware company, you're kind of surrounded with the people like-minded. You know, that's so important, that people that they really appreciate what you're doing and they really understand that's important. That's so hard. You know, software is also so hard, of course, but hardware is a different type of problems. At Brandy and William say the cost and all those things is so important. But at the same time, working with people like Andy, G, Susan, or Duncan, that they really know what's the steps are. So you have to take some problems from earlier stages, scale it, the problems with customers, the problems with fundraising, the problems with all these. And most of the times you don't know the answer and you are kind of acting and you don't know what's the outcome. You come back to the meetings every time that we were meeting Andy with a smile on the face. And I was always kind of wondering how Andy is so happy and what's he's doing to recharge himself. And then you're getting the same energy from the team. I think that's so important. You know, just every step that you're going in this process, you really are very kind of, I can say, blessed by connecting with amazing people. Like on your fundraising, you're going back and say, that's what they presented. That's the feedback I got. What's the next step? Because you don't know. It's your first time most of the time. Yeah, the founders at first time. And they say, it's better to run it in this way. And you're going to make the decision. But that kind of feedback and mentorship is so important. Whenever you're talking with Duncan, he is out of kind of nowhere, give you some advice. It takes you 2 months to realize that was so smart what he said. I think one of the most important of working with HAX for us and a kind of, I think with Hyperlume and my team, was working with the great people inside of the HAX, like seeing exactly what the difficulty of the product development is, knowing the steps. Like G is coming with some technical questions that possibly sometimes you're missing some steps. I think the people in the HAX are adding the highest value to kind of this ecosystem, and I'm really appreciating for that one actually.
Thank you. That's awesome. I want to touch on another topic, which is also like a fun one when you think about moving from academia into industry. And Andy, I'm sure, has a lot of perspective here, but it's really the role of techno-economic analysis. I think for all of your businesses, this is an important tool, and the use of this tool evolves over time. But I'd be curious maybe to start out understanding how you guys have approached that and how you've used it, and see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I think we could I kind of link this to the previous question, in that one of the first bits of feedback we got when we got to HAX was from Andy, and he said, if you guys want to raise any money, you're going to need a really solid TEA on this process. And it was, it was invaluable. It was the first thing we started developing when we got to HAX, and so we got put in touch with, some really, really useful people to help us develop the TEA. And now it is, it's one of the cornerstones of our quarterly goals, our OKRs, our critical path to technology development. We use our TEA, we look at the uncertainties in the process around the cost, and we say, well, what can we do now? What experiments can we complete to try and, zone in on some of the uncertainties here and get a really clear idea of, at scale, how much is this process really going to cost? And that ultimately, I think, gives a lot of peace of mind to potential investors.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that as well. It was one of the very first things that we did after we joined the HAX program too. And we got some external support for that as well. There's a firm in Calgary that specializes in some of that work. And I think we spent close to about 10,000 on that. And that seemed insane to me. There's so much equipment that I could buy for that. And it was worth its weight in gold. Being able to really dig in on the techno-economics and understand, oh, this one parameter actually dictates our costs more than anything else. That is now our top key performance indicator that we have to focus on, or else our business doesn't work. And those insights at an early stage are invaluable to making sure that you're ready for the next fundraise and really ready to have a product that can go to market. So yeah, I echo where you're coming at, Will, that way more important than I ever thought, especially academics just don't do that in chemistry.
Yeah, but it's kind of nice though. It's like a framework, and like it makes sense to me.
Yeah. There's numbers, the math work.
So I can just add to that one. Actually, this is one of the things on top of lots of things that you're getting from HAX. Just some of these activities, Brandy said, you haven't done it before. And if someone is asking, so what's the kind of unit economy of your product? You're coming and say, what's that? And they say, what's production cost, risks that you have, like the labor cost. And you say, early days when you have a startup, I don't know. And then you're coming back, as Susan said, spending time with the HAX team, kind of going all through the processes, and you're getting those skills and you're learning. And as Will said, lots of them are the foundation of your work as a business, because you're not running anymore an R&D institute. You're running a business. You have to be profitable. You have to deliver, and you have competitors. You have to be in the kind of both kind of technical spec and both price and everything very competitive to whatever already exists in the market to be successful. And I think when something really wanted to be measured, it should be based on numbers. If it's not based on numbers, if someone says, how is the weather today? It's so good. It might be good for you, bad for someone else. But when it's numbers, the dollars numbers is speaking on dollars number. The time is days, hours, minutes. So that's an amazing thing of, as I say, turning those qualitative feeling to quantitative values that can be measured, can be kind of qualified, I can say. And over time, we can improve it, as Brandy and Will mentioned it again. I want to say that's an amazing experience too that you're learning through this program.
Awesome. I think maybe we'll take some of the questions that are coming out in the Q&A here. The first one I'm going to speak to and ask a little bit of everyone to answer is, could the HAX speakers and founders touch on the experience building cross-border science and technology companies? Obviously, HAX has a global presence. And how do we think about, well, I would say there's multiple pieces to this, but also how do we think about emerging markets? And perhaps G and Andy, you want to take a stab at that at the outset?
Sure, I'll take a quick stab at it. Yeah, so we HAX employs full-time engineers. We have 10 around the globe. I think Brandy, you mentioned that like working at HAX feels like you have 10 more additional members. We literally do have 10 more additional members helping with companies around the world. And as physical sciences investors, as early stage physical sciences companies that you're all running, having a global team is important. There are a spread of expertise, ecosystems, and technologies that exist around the world that startups should utilize, and then we also trying to utilize as a core competency. For example, Newark is our headquarter where most of our staff do reside and all the companies are located in. But we do have a Tokyo office, which has access to advanced sensors and analytic equipments. We have a Pune office that does a lot of computational engineering and also mechanical engineering and mechanical sourcing. And we also have a Shenzhen office, which is procurement for electronics and PCB production. So that helps companies to move fast by acquisition technologies, simulate technologies, and work with advanced analytical companies, and also have a team that knows the ecosystems, knows the components, knows the supply chain to help our company move fast. I think there's a question here also touch upon the setting up the supply chain for production in Asia from a European company, from a European automotive company. So I'm going to answer that because it is a little bit adjacent to the previous question. So we definitely help strategize the setting up the supply chain. A lot of our companies a lot of companies in general do find a challenge when they're trying to scale up their production. And that becomes a critical piece of being a successful company or not, is the first foray into the production, mass production of their technologies and concepts. So we do help with that. And it's a, like there are locations in the world that's good for one thing, and optimized for some of the productions. So in that question, I think you're asking about production in China to be cost competitive in particular. So it really depends. For simple mechanical heavy or simple electronic heavy, yes, it could be. But there are a variety of different challenges associated with production in China, especially now. But it really needed nuance in discussion into what you're making, who's buying it, and the technical know-how that your manufacturer will deploy to make your production successful.
And I would just add a little bit on what G's saying about thinking about global teams. I think, every single one of the companies here, whether it's Cocoon, Ayrton, or Hyperlume, they're solving world scale problems, right? These don't happen in a single geography, right? So the moment we make an investment, despite it being maybe a team of 3 people, we're encouraging them to think globally from day one. Right. And it's really, really important. And some of that global thinking comes from the fact that we have a global team. And so the second you come and join us, you're starting to think globally already. But these plants and these solutions will be built all over the world, and they'll be built by talent that comes from all over the world. And getting that mindset in the company, like from the earliest days, is super, super important and critical for success. It allows you to leverage time zones, unique perspectives, unique talents, and it's just really something that we emphasize. Encouraging our founders to get on airplanes and go meet people in person, and just move around and make these things happen.
Yeah. I think we have a great question in the chat here that I'm going to highlight, which is, can the founders discuss their experience with finding product market fit as first-time entrepreneurs? And I think it's a great question because obviously that's such an important thing, and even something, we debate frequently amongst ourselves. So I'd love to hear what you guys have had as experience there.
I can kick us off. As a first-time entrepreneur, I learned really how important product market fit is. And as you'd said, Susan, before, good science doesn't make for a good product all the time. And so my first company that I'd founded as a spinoff from my postdoc work at University of Calgary was developing battery membrane separators for the like alternative ion battery technologies, so like vanadium zinc type technologies. I don't think I could have gone more niche if I had tried. And so it really just wasn't a product that somebody was going to sell. Yeah, it was great. We validated it. We could get like 150% improvement in performance on the tech. Great. Nobody was going to buy my product, especially at the cost that it was as I got more into the techno-economic side on it too. So we really came at, I ended up getting into consulting afterwards, and that's where I met my co-founder. And I came about Ayrton Energy from a completely different perspective. We started with the customers and then developed a product accordingly. So we were looking at hydrogen storage solutions, and I had a good idea of what the broad range of different technologies were. And as we talked with customers and really understood their pain point, we defined what the technology was going to be to fit that. And that makes so much more sense for a company than to just take whatever you were kind of doing at university and spin it into a company. You develop so much of a skill set on how to do R&D and how to do science and build technology, and you have to lean in on that and think about the product that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I would just say exactly what Brandy said again, basically. I think I was very lucky in that Elliot was a second time founder. So one of my co-founders, Elliot, he'd already founded a company. So he's, familiar very much with these concepts. And, I think I'm very grateful to him for being so patient with me when we were doing all of this discovery work. And yeah, I mean, what Brandy has spoken about with regards to the toolkit that you sort of develop when you're doing a PhD and trying to apply that to the problems that the industry is sort of consistently telling you that they need solved is it's a really satisfying and useful endeavor.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on that. Will and Brandy said almost everything. Yeah. It's kind of funny. One of the things I said is you in every founder, as much as you continue the process, you're going to learn it. Just be open. Yeah. Don't be kind of, as Brandy said, too much niche. I remember I was in Waterloo. There was a conversation that we had because it's not from mine. I have to give the credit to other people. There was some question, someone with lots of amazing startup. He asked from the founders in the room, what's the three main things that keeps a business going or be successful? So someone says, for example, the great technology, someone says customers. So some three main important things that guy, I'm just referring to him, that is the most important thing for every company or every business to going on, even we see it in the stock market these days, is sales, sales, sales. Nothing more than sale. And for the sale, the most important thing is your customer. So you have to have a customer. And for that one, you have to go and talk with people. As Andy said, sometimes you need to just travel around the world, just take the plane, go in the conferences, find them, sit down maybe, and don't be shy, like just sitting down 6 hours, 5 hours somewhere just to get to know someone, to talk with them. Just use every opportunity that you have just to make sure you're talking with the right people, someone who has the capability to make the decision, someone who really is credible in the industry, and sometimes you need to learn it over time. So don't worry if you don't know how to do it. There is an amazing, I think show or music everyone hears about. Freddie Mercury says, "Show must go on." So the key here is don't stop. Just keep alive, just keep running, and don't kind of feel if sometimes in a month, in a week, in 2 months, you're not getting your product market fit. Don't worry about that. Just going. and possibly in the right time, that you have to just make sure like you have someone just to check the facts. As I say, the HAX is an amazing thing. So you can come back and anything that you learn, you can share and you can get some feedback. But just going and going and going, and it would be a time that you realize you're speaking with the right person in the industry, and you have the customers, and you can build your business around it. And that's the most important thing. That's just from me.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I mean, one thing someone asked me recently, because I came from a PhD background and then ended up leading business development at a startup. And they were like, how are you doing that? Because, you know, I think people think business development is just sales, right? But I think some of the things you guys are saying touches on the point around, you know, at an early stage company, when you're trying to figure out the fit in the market for your innovation and kind of how that problem then really matches up with the solution that you have, it's a lot more than just pure sales or what we would normally define as sales, right? There's a lot of iterative conversations, going out to customers, understanding not so much what is your unmet need, what is the problem, but more just like what's happening today, how is that working? Trying to understand where my tech might be able to fit in there and solve some of the things they're speaking about, maybe without them even defining those things as problems, I think is part of what the approach needs to be. And I actually think in that way, you know, technical founders can be really good at this, because if they can properly listen and interpret what's going on, and they very well understand their tech and what it can do, they start to really create a bridge between those two things. And that's where I think the best examples of really finding product market fit can come.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that you can only get to that stage once you've really developed a relationship with, you know, your key stakeholders. Like, you need to put a lot of effort into that. Developing that relationship. And as we've sort of mentioned before, going to see people in person, having lunch, you know, it's like a lot of sort of soft skills that contribute to this stuff. The Cocoon's like biggest commercial sort of breakthroughs have come from traveling, in-person meetings, developing those kind of relationships. Really important.
That's a great point. And I think that's, for me, also like one of the things that's hard coming from a scientist background, where you're supposed to know all the answers, or if you don't know, you better go look in a book and like read and be the smartest person. So all of a sudden it's like, I need to go out in the world, understand what people think, build those relationships, and also be comfortable taking an aggregate of what I'm hearing and trying to synthesize that into, this is what the market needs. And now I've kind of defined this unmet need by a bunch of conversations and really knowing the market from a real personal perspective. We have a few more questions that maybe I'll just try to put out here. One of them is just, if you're coming from a science perspective, at what point and how do you actually start to figure out that the science you're doing and your research might have market relevance? And how do you approach that? I mean, I think a number of you are talking about really starting more from a market perspective and then trying to find the right solution. But obviously it's a little bit of both. Like, as you have technology, how do you figure out where it might fit in the market and what opportunities there may be?
Yeah, I think like the first thing I'd say to that, which I think echoes Brandy's previous comments, is like, you've come at it at the wrong end. Like, you need to have gone out and spoken to people before you started developing the tech to figure out what they really needed and done this discovery. If you have just developed technology, then who knows? Like no one knows whether it's valuable, and no one knows where it fits in the market. And I mean, you just have to go and talk to people and, you know, test hypotheses. Like, yeah, it's not easy.
I would say, though, as much as like my first company failed hard, it was such a good experience. And one of the things that's really nice about coming out of academics as a founder is there's a lot of fellowships, there's a lot of time, even in like grad school, postdoc experiences, where you can sit and think about these things. And I was able to get into some really good accelerators and incubators that helped me understand what a good company would look like and help me build a network, so that as I've gone into this venture, I have people to talk to connect me with customers. And I would add, when I'm saying customers, I'm also thinking about just generally people that are in the industry. It doesn't have to be somebody that's going to buy your product. It's going to be somebody that might have to use your product for a project that they're doing and things like that too. So yeah, I would say for me, for my first company where I'd gone out of kind of a university lab, I'd actually taken and developed this like enhanced oil recovery technology. It was terrible for that, but I turned it into this like battery product, right? And so it was really just about looking at what I had and thinking creatively about what problem this could really solve. And I think that skill set was very transferable as I got into entrepreneurship to a different level with Ayrton.
I think Will and Brandy said almost everything. There is nothing for me to add. I think for these cases, there is I think one assumption is, since you're coming from university, there is an understanding or assumption that you possibly have the technical background. So you don't need to practically work on it too much more. So you have the basic technical skills to understand the problem and have some meaningful conversation with someone who has a problem. The two more important things really to have a business really successful and build something on top of it is, first of all, you have to make sure that you're working on the problem that really someone has it. It's a real problem, not the assumption. Possibly in your networking, in your, as Will said, in communication in person, or Brandy said, going to incubating, you have to make sure that you're asking the hard questions first. Don't be shy in any conversation. Only be very polite, be kind of, as I said, kind of bold on your statement, but don't be shy and ask the hardest problem or hardest questions. Is it really a problem that you have? Make it very clear for yourself. Don't go with assumption. Go with really kind of clarification for yourself, because you're going to spend your times, your life, and not yours, capital from someone else, life of other people that you're going to hire them. So to make sure you're really completely clear on the problem, first of all. Second, we have to see what's the size of that market. If it's really huge market, that's also very important. And the third thing, I can say the last one is, the solution that you're providing, you have to make sure you're differentiated enough from the rest of the market. What Airbnb has done on kind of hoteling in the world. So if another company was making the most beautiful hotels in New York or in San Jose, possibly they haven't been as much successful as Airbnb was. So the solution that you're providing, thanks to your technical background, I guess, is going to be really differentiated what already exists in the market. And then you're going to grab a big punch of the market.
You touched on this a couple times, Mohsen, about really being able to ask the hard questions and like take that feedback. And as a very Canadian, I would absolutely agree that was one of the steepest learning curves for me, was being able to just like address the elephant in the room. And one of the things that I can't actually remember which advisor had recommended this to me, but they were like, look into radical candor. And that sort of mindset actually was really helpful for me to think about bluntness not as rudeness, but as actually giving feedback that is good for people. People want to do better on things, including myself, and being able to take feedback better as well. So yeah, I feel that one as a Canadian.
Being clear is being kind, as they say. But yeah, I think that's a really good one. I think we have one more question we wanted to take quickly that G will address. And I know maybe a couple of our panelists, or maybe Will, you need to jump here, but we'll take one more question. I'll also just say thank you all panelists so much for being here. But we'll carry on for a few more minutes for those.
Yeah. Thanks very much, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to take a quick stab at Patrick's question here about bringing a TRL4 marine technology company to TRL7. So SOSV is very have a strong mandate to invest in the marine industry. It is the marine transport do produce 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and we have invested quite a bit into the marine industry. We have a company called Neptune Robotics that was on a panel yesterday in the summit that talked about how they are decarbonizing the marine industry by creating robots that cleans barnacles in marine vessels in ships. And that when we invest in them, that was a TRL, I would say 4 company. However, it became a TRL 3 when they noticed that when they did a lot of the customer discovery and find out that original inspection robot is not what the customer want, and that's when we switched to a clean robot. And now, of course, it's much more mature and then it's deployed in some of the biggest ports in the world and cleans some of the biggest ship in the world. So the short answer to your question, Patrick, is yes, we do invest in TRL4 companies, and we believe that marine industry is a place where mature technologies are needed, but some of the most disruptive technologies are still in low TRL.
And maybe just quickly adding on to what Gia said there, I think when we think about moving from those early TRL levels up to higher TRL levels, one of the challenges that we have to think about is how we pay for it and how we finance it, right? Perhaps when we talk about robotic solutions, that becomes something that people are a little bit more familiar with financing. You can produce many of them repeatedly, et cetera. But as we talk about maybe new engines or new ship architectures, the financing on that becomes very, very challenging. And I think that that's a new muscle that needs to be learned for scientific founders as well, right? First, we're teaching them how to go from speaking the language of PhD to VC, and then we have to help them make that leap from VC language to banking language and loans, et cetera. And that's another transition that comes a bit later in the journey, but still a very, very important one as we think about that journey.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in and for the great questions and dialogue. Thanks, Brandy and Mohsen and Will, who have left us. But thanks to all of you guys as founders for being willing to tell your stories and share about your experiences. I think hopefully it's inspiring to the next generation of founders. And yeah, it's been good getting to talk to everyone. HAX is always looking for new companies. TRL4 is a good level to come talk to us. So yeah, we would love to learn more about what you're building. So don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you all for participating in this session.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.